give everyone an idea of what we're going to discuss today. Obviously, it's part of the how-to series that UKPA produce. I'm very pleased to be hosting this one. So as a partner of the UKPA, yeah, we're going to be looking today at how to retain talent. Basically, it's a tricky market, has been since post-COVID in terms of the talent pool. And employees, how employee expectation has changed, and obviously in the tech market that's been a bit more challenging, in sort of for the last 9 months as well potentially, and how we sort of retain our top talent is incredibly important. And I suppose in the post-pandemic world, a lot's changed in terms of the blurring of work-life balance boundaries, and the expectations of the people within your team. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into this with Kally from Essensys when she can get on. She's actually currently at a charity event that they're running with the team. So that's part of the retention process for them, and it'd be very interesting to hear how that's working when she gets on. I mean, just to give you a rundown of what we do, Cherry Pick People are a talent management consultancy, so we focus on talent acquisition, recruitment, but as well as that, also retention. So because of what I said in terms of the market changing over not just post-pandemic, it was pre-pandemic, the challenges of finding good people and getting them into your business has become increasingly difficult. When I started in recruitment 15 years ago, it was quite straightforward to find a short list of good people that you could put forward to clients, but over the years we've seen that become more and more challenging, whereby you're headhunting for people for above a grad, or it's not just C-suite, it's mid-level, it's even second jobbers that you're headhunting for potential staff. So it is very challenging, and therefore recruitment and how people manage their teams or manage their talent process has become more and more paramount, and retaining good people is really important. So that's where we've sort of helped our clients understand how they can retain people, and what they can do to make sure they keep the best people within their businesses. So yeah, but hopefully Kally will be with us shortly, and we can get into that with her. So yeah, and then at the end, hopefully we can run through some top tips for people to take on board to utilize in their businesses. So yeah, Sammy, what should we discuss while we wait for Kally to come on?
Well, one of the things I think I've noticed, from the outside looking in at Cherry Pick People, is that you seem to have a really engaged, vibrant team. So while we're waiting for Kally, I'd love to find out what you're doing at Cherry Pick People. I'm not sure if you're going to cover that with Kally.
Yeah,
but
no, well, I don't. I'm sure we're some. I'm sure I would have given some insight into what we do. But yeah, it's really really getting to understand the motives of the people within your business, and what makes them tick on a personal level, because their careers ultimately have to fulfill their personal goals, and ensuring that you understand what their drivers are, and then can help fulfill them through their career. That's really important. But yeah, I mean, I see, obviously I engage with loads of businesses and understand and see lots of common mistakes that people make, or businesses make, and some of them are really obvious and probably aren't new to a lot of people, but we see it happen quite regularly. Hey Kally, how you doing?
Stressful morning, but this is about engagement in its fullest, which is over engaged, and then you put yourself into difficult situations. Yes. So I am on a charity day, and we're in a house that we're going to decorate for some homeless individuals. So it's quite a good engagement day, but technology wasn't going to be on my side here.
No, fair enough. But I mean, look, it's a very relevant sort of activity that you're doing. So, I mean, is this something that helps, retain or engage your staff? Do you find that they enjoy that and have and you get feedback from them in that respect?
Sure. I mean, we've just sort of started with sort of partnerships, and we're working with a London charity and a charity in New York as well, a single homeless trust here. And it was a sort of a discussion before I arrived over a year ago that they wanted to have a bit more of a robust sort of, a social responsibility type program. And then finding something that actually meets everybody's needs is always more difficult. But then picking topics that, whether it's education, homelessness, that resonate with everybody, and especially with everybody's experience of the pandemic, sort of giving back is an important piece. But you also have to remember it's a very personal choice. So I think, when we think about sort of creating programs, you kind of have to look at it in a way that, the majority might engage, some might sort of prefer other things. As long as I think you kind of don't force people into kind of having sort of false expectation or false fun, as I call it. It's not engagement, but actually, employees have been very receptive. There's 8 or 9 of us today. We're giving up, a day of work and other responsibilities and doing something completely different and learning new skills. I'm not known for my decoration skills, so this will be a great improvement. So yeah, I think that the concept of giving back in charity has always been there, but I think it's much more prevalent now because I think the one thing we've learned over the pandemic is we want more, and it's got to be more than maybe the way we worked before. So it is a key retention tool, but it's also the right thing to help people engage.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we've certainly seen that a move over the years away from maybe much more focus on what's my salary and where's my career going, to the softer things that might be like, how charity work, what other benefits might be available and that sort of stuff. And particularly the pandemic, a lot of people suffered, psychologically as well. So, managing that is really important. But it's important for staff coming in and then obviously retaining them. But what I'd love to find out from you, Kally, is sort of experiences or lessons you've learned when trying to keep employees engaged, motivated, satisfied. What things have worked best for you, and I suppose maybe have you seen that change over your time in your career?
Yeah, I think engagement has changed. I think one thing that we're all experiencing that, certainly I didn't experience early on in my career is we've got 5 generations working. And actually, I think in the past, we probably would have done engagement very much with one size fits all. I actually think it's much more personalized now. And I think you can't, I totally accept most companies would say, well, we can't personalize everything. But I think you just have to work a little bit harder to understand kind of, what are the differences? What do people want? And it may not meet everyone's requirements, subject to where they are in the career journey, subject to the point of life experiences they've had. And I take a lot of analogy, not that I'm a sports person myself, but I do like sports. And I kind of think about sports coaches, whether it's in basketball or football, how they really look at individuals. Now, okay, they're smaller teams, but to get the best out is to know what motivates them. So I actually think the pivot for me is managers, how we engage with our teams is very different to when I started, which, it's fairly ancient. You cannot be as micromanaging, you cannot be as autocratic. We're in much more what I call a term, adaptive leadership, which is, you don't need to know everything about your employees, but understand what their triggers are, what are their motivations. It doesn't take a lot at the start of a meeting, and my team probably get irritated with me when I always say from 1 to 10, how are you feeling? And what they don't know is I note them all down, and then I look at patterns, and I think, maybe I need to have a different chat with that individual, because I think, if you can have a sense of where motivation leads and what triggers low motivation, what excites them, it really helps you retain people. It kind of at least says, okay, you want different experiences. I know there's a lot of chat about, especially in tech, people leave because of money and stuff, but the number one stat for leaving still is a relationship with the manager. So I think there's a lot more ownership as leaders. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Alex.
No, I think, we'll talk around it, to be honest. You raised a few good points there. Your last point about people leaving managers, that's a common phrase that I often use. People don't leave companies, they leave managers. And you also touched on a point I raised before you joined about, understanding the individual's motivations, because, ultimately their careers need to fulfill their personal goals. So if you understand that, then you don't have to make assumptions about where they want to be, because, like you say, it's differs for everyone, and understanding that is really important. And I just wanted to say thanks for the questions in from the chat. I'll get those into the conversation as we go. So if anyone wants to put any questions forward, please do, and I'll pick out the ones I can and put them forward to Kally as well. But yeah, I think the sort of adaptive management is very key, and there is a change. I mean, I suppose it might come from the environment that we're in terms of talent, record levels of employment, and maybe that may be changing. We hear about the redundancies being made now, but we're still very, very, very high levels of employment based on historical standards. And so, I think it's not just a change in expectation of, we don't want to be micromanaged, but actually we don't have to be we don't need to be anymore. If you're going to micromanage us, we can go somewhere else. I think, it's very important that people understand what their goals are, maybe set their own goals, and can own them, which helps them engage. Obviously, if you're, rather than just being told exactly what to do in a micromanagement sort of level. Obviously, it depends on the level they're at, of course. When people start out, they need more direction. As they progress through their career, they want more autonomy. But yeah, I think you raised quite a few good topics there. I suppose one thing I'm sure a few people would be interested to know is any sort of common or biggest mistakes you see from businesses. You've been in business a while yourself, and what are there any sort of common things you see people, businesses or individuals doing that have led to people becoming disengaged, or their teams being disengaged, or feeling undervalued and ultimately leaving? Is there anything springs to mind on that topic?
I mean, it varies. I've had a broad career with lots of different companies, different points in their business. When you're in sort of tough times, you react in different ways. I think that there is a simple thing: throwing money at it is never the solution, because people will still leave. That's a short-term fix. When you're in there, you kind of think, oh no, that's what will keep people. So sometimes we kind of look for short-term fixes to throw at a problem that we're seeing. And sometimes also we don't actually spend enough time to really understand who is the real talent. We have assumptions. So actually being a bit more mindful of that. And then, I've been in situations where suddenly you lose somebody, and then suddenly that person was the talent. But, nobody actually sat down with that person, engaged with that person in that way. So we create our own problems sometimes. So, those two pieces stand out. And actually also, I think one of the things I've noticed over the years is in the traditional career, you know, you start, it's a very hierarchical approach, you know, I'm going to be a manager or a specialist, you know, such. Actually, the world has sort of changed, and it was changing a little bit before COVID and so forth, the years before. It's about experiences and allowing people to kind of maybe take a big leap within an organization. So in a previous company, one of the things I sort of bought, it wasn't my concept, you know, a lot of professional services companies to companies like Unilever do this a lot, internal gigging. So you might be, you know, little of me, I might be an HR person, but I might fancy coding, which I wouldn't ever give me that job, actually. So, but you know, I have a creative lens in different ways. But if I felt that I was in an environment that would allow me to kind of learn, I think, you know, upskilling the workforce and giving them opportunities to reinvent themselves is going to be key, because that is definitely a big interest. I want to know what skills I need for the future. I'm in the traditional role, I'd like to try out something else. And you know, sometimes we make excuses, we're too big a company or we're too small and we need everybody to be operating 100%. But I think we have to have a much more agile workforce. So I think sometimes limiting, restricting real talent to try things does lead them to go somewhere else to try it. Yeah.
I definitely, and I'll come on to a couple of questions that Chennai has posted in a second, but just on my thoughts on that topic is, you know, quite a common mistake I see businesses making. It's relatively obvious, I suppose, but mismanagement of expectations early on. So not having a very clear, and this, you know, can be a challenge with startups and that sort of stuff as well, because it's hard to get a clear idea of what you need from that person maybe at the very beginning. But quite often I see people leaving businesses because there's been a mismanagement of expectations at the start, and it's not clearly communicated regularly enough through their time with the business. So they end up leaving, and you know, someone's frustrated by it, but you know, and the talent themselves are good, but because the expectations have diverged, they end up, you know, the relationship ends up falling apart, and through you sort of, not because they couldn't work out. And I see that opportunity for more regular communication and reassessment of what the expectations are, and making sure they're clear for people through their careers to really help engagement and retention. But yeah, so Chennai has asked a few questions, and well, the first one being, what are the unique challenges faced by prop techs, either because of the industry we are or the one we serve? Do you think there's anything?
I always love a question from Chennai, as she is the expert of prop tech. I'm definitely not the prop tech expert. What I can say more broadly in general with tech is, you know, I think tech is going through an interesting time of reinventing itself. We definitely, I suppose, a little bit more focus maybe on prop tech as such is the whole concept of hybrid working. You know, if you're enabling buildings, you're trying to create these great experiences, you need people in them, and we're all sort of kind of grappling as to where that's going to be. I think we all accept hybrid is here to stay. So how can prop tech enable you know, a working environment to be a destination, which, you know, a lot of us of a certain age kind of go, oh, you just go to work and, you know, sit at a desk. It's more to it. And I think, you know, actually, if you know, prop tech sort of looked at working with sort of landlords or flex operators on creating that kind of environment, because there is more we want from the place we go and work. So those are real challenges we're seeing. Our relationship generally with the way we want to work has a huge impact with technology, and I think that goes across you know, any technology industry. A lot of the larger tech companies built wonderful buildings and stuff, and laying empty in some cases. So you know, there's some reinvention we've got to do and show the value of why we come into work. And one of the pieces that I've been subtly doing, probably annoying the executive team at Essensys, is you know, kind of, I call it nudging. Let's not over, sort of just sort of steady, constant communication. And it's also very telling when you kind of look at that, is, you know, how many times emails overused, or Slack or whatever, how many times are people looking at it? Are they really reading it? Are they really engaging it? So I think, you know, again, probably not answering Chennai's question. She knows that, you know, sort of to it deeply. But if you just go back to generally what's happening in the workplaces, you know, we are all challenged with knowing what work looks like going forward. Remote and hybrid has some really good benefits, prop tech, to make a real difference, but also challenges. And the whole concept of, you know, people really are rightly so focused on sort of health and well-being. And, you know, work is important, but it's got to have a balance with what I do in life as well. So, you know, meeting that halfway. You know, there are certain generations that are much more focused on purpose-led work. So, you know, you've got to show them whatever we do, what's the impact of, doesn't matter what I do, what do I, you know, how do I engage? And I think, you know, prop tech does have challenges, as the industry, commercial real estate has challenges, but I think there is a real opportunity to pivot, showing how technology could enable some wonderful experiences. So, you know, whether you want to kind of have just ease of working, whether you want to have a place where you can do your real thinking, where you can create collaboration, where you can connect. As human beings, we still need to do that. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We may not physically do it 5 days a week. We still need to do it, you know, 2 or 3 days a week. There's clearly no doubt.
Yeah, it makes a big difference when you get in and see everybody face to face, as opposed to just, you know, on the Zoom calls, which are, you know, they're better than the telephone call, but they're no substitute. And I think with Chennai, along that topic of I suppose talent within prop tech and real estate as a whole, I mean, I think actually as we sort of go through the digital transformation of real estate, there is definitely a challenge in terms of a unique challenge in terms of those. I talk to a lot of people about within the real estate businesses who are driving innovation, and we did a report last year looking at that sort of demographic of people, and half those people were property experts who were sort of put the hand up to do innovation and sort of took it on. And I've talked to a lot of business owners and in the real estate space and some of those challenges that they face, because, you know, they might have very specific challenges that are within that commercial or residential, whatever, that part of real estate be very, you know, have a lot of legislation or you have to really understand that particular space, but also need to understand the tech and how that's going to, how the tech or the prop tech will evolve that process. So actually getting people who understand both is a real challenge, and there's not many of them, to be honest. So in terms of a unique challenge to the space, that is definitely there. And Chennai also raises another question: how do smaller businesses compete for talent when they can't compete on salary? So I suppose this is a acquisition and retention question in terms of, you know, attracting people in the first place, and then obviously in a candidate short market, a lot of your staff will always be being tapped up by other companies saying, you know, come and work for me, I can pay you more. You know, how do businesses keep them, I suppose, when they might be getting offered more elsewhere?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid question. When you are sort of the David and the Goliath situation, how do you retain people? And with sort of recession, people look for security and all of that matters. And how do you attract them? It starts from the very beginning. You know, get people to connect with your story. As human beings, people buy people. It does matter. And you know, from the minute you sort of start engaging with them, be very transparent on kind of where the company's going, what you're trying to achieve, and make sure, you know, I cannot emphasize, if you get your onboarding wrong, you can predict very quickly how, you know, if you're going to retain that person, because in that first 3 or 4 months, people make a decision. So get your onboarding right. And then, you know, it goes back to what I said, know the motivators and show them that actually they're going to gain experiences. They may not somewhere else, they may earn more money, but they're going to gain experiences that they wouldn't. And you know, I'm a great believer in let them engage with employees who've really bought into the purpose. So get them to meet the ambassadors of the company early. And also then, you know, I have probably a different lens, even though I've been a long stayer at most of my previous companies. I have a different lens to say there is a point in time where you may have to accept that talent goes, but isn't it great if they become your ambassador? And often talent does stay loyal to you. They may go somewhere else because they would desire to do something different, but they may not go to your competition because they actually believe in what you're doing. So I think small companies kind of have to show that actually the skill set, the experience they'll get, how they'll touch the business, how they'll be engaged, even the day that we're doing today, you know, that sometimes doesn't always happen in larger organizations. You know, it's sometimes harder to to drive some of that change. And you know, being part of something to take, you know, make, you know, if you're a startup or you're, you know, kind of a sort of a scale up, you're there to create something, and you know, it might one day become a big company, but isn't it great to be part of it when it just started? So it is about
Definitely
engaging, you know, get them to connect.
Yeah, I think you know, like you mentioned a few things there with that small businesses have over a large corporate that they can offer to people coming on board. Obviously, you know, probably a bit more they might the opportunity to influence the growth of a business. So the right type of person coming, you know, the right type of people want that. You know, they don't want to be part of a corporate structure necessarily. And if there's opportunity there for them to work closely with the C-suite or the director, the CEO, you know, that can be a real attractive part of you know, the employee value proposition. You know, that opportunity there to learn from someone who's very senior, work closely with them, and maybe influence how a business grows. That's something that I think I see. You know, we may use when we're talking to people for our smaller startup businesses that we work with. That is a big attraction piece for the right person. And quite often you find that, you know, there'll be people who we speak to who really want to go into the corporate environment and they're not right for the small startup, you know, and there'll be, but equally there'll be people who go, I feel stifled, I don't want to just be another number, I don't want to be part of I want to have a bit more influence and autonomy and, you know, just opportunity to make a difference. But I think connecting with your story, really giving, I mean, something that's really important, probably always has been important, but is more important now when there is you know, record levels of employment and that sort of stuff. And you know,
just,
is that care.
Just adding to that on that care, what I probably was describing, really, most people, yes, obviously the basics like pay and everything is really important, but a lot of us, without even realizing subtly, we look for cultures that we think we're going to connect. And some of the work that we've been doing at Essensys is kind of revigorating, redriving the way our values show up. And I think a lot of us would, without us even realizing, you know, you don't sit there with a piece of paper and say, oh, well, yeah, that value sticks, that, but you kind of go, okay, that really resonates with me. And the culture you create and the values you have will help you retain people without a doubt, because they can see them.
And part of that's really important is the very initial selection. You know, if you know what your values are and how they can be manifested in behaviors, sort of thing, when you're actually interviewing people to come on board, you're selecting people that have the same values. you know, it's difficult, you know, because you've got to be conscious of your unconscious biases. You're not just hiring someone like you, but you got to think about what your business represents, and you want people to be able to be themselves within your organization, but you want people that share the same values, or, you know, fit in with the culture in that respect, but not, you know.
Yeah. The only challenge I have to that from a diversity inclusion point of view, I do agree the core of your company has to be connected. They have to, you know, really show how the values come to force. But there are times where you need talent for a particular point in time. And I think, you know, it's important to remember that sometimes you do bring people in who may be unique, who may be disruptors, who may challenge you. And what you have to do as an organization, then, I call it, you have to put scaffolding around them. So what do I mean by that? Give them people who are going to help them, not disrupt to the point they can't be effective. Totally off piece, but there's a fantastic ex CMO of, she was at Pepsi, then she went to where did she go next? She went to Apple, then Uber, then Netflix. She's just written a book. Her name is Boz St. James. She's a disruptor and wouldn't necessarily fit all of those cultures, but when she went in, she was phenomenal to what she did. But, you know, honestly, most of those companies probably knew they couldn't retain her, because her excitement is about change and doing things. So I think we should, you know, sometimes, yeah. And I think from a diversity inclusion point of view, we should sometimes open our lens and say, what do we need at this point in time? And that might help us sort of manage the way we manage talent.
I definitely think you want to, you need to have different angles of how to approach things and understand things, but, you know, equally you want to get people that are, you know, you're going to get on with the stuff as well. But yeah, you want different angles and you want to have different viewpoints, and people, especially, you want to have also the opportunity to hire more people. You know, if you've got a broader pool of people to bring in, then that gives you more opportunity to more people to speak to. I also like what you said earlier, and maybe something for people to consider is actually the mindset of retention. You know, a lot of people, especially small businesses, or, you know, when they're startups, might be hiring someone and thinking, you know, they're going to be with me forever and be my, you know, my next director and that sort of thing. I'm going to take them, you know, we're going to grow. But actually, sort of maybe, and we spoke about this before, Kelly, but like you mentioned the teams, or, you know, think of like a football team like Alex Ferguson's Manchester United. He rebuilt a team again and again, and they can be sort of cyclical in that respect. So maybe having a different, managing our own expectations about what we want from an individual in our business. You know, how long do they stay? You know, and how long's a good time? Because you might grow together for a certain amount of time, and then they need to go off and do something else, or you know, your business changes and you're going in a slightly different direction, and you move away from each other like you might do in a normal relationship. And I think that concept is good to remember. So if you're thinking that you've people coming into your business for 3, 4, 5 years, rather than they're going to be here forever, and maybe you plan your talent strategy differently.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good summary, Alex, in the sense that in the traditional sense, when we, you know, companies look at talent, they kind of look at, you know, how long they've been in the role, what skill set. What you should also be looking, how long have they been in that role, and are we totally dependent on them? And that often also is an indicator that, you know, sometimes individuals want experiences. And I think, you know, we have to be open to the fact that there is a new lens on how people want to have relationships with companies. You know, there is a generation, including my own daughters, who kind of don't want to do 10 years with an organization. So the best thing you can do is say, well, what's the experiences we get from them? And if they go out there, hopefully not to our competition, but they go somewhere else, they become alumni. And then sometimes, in some cases, there's a boomerang, which they go out and then they come back. So I don't think we can completely say to people, you know, you're going to be here forever. What you need to be able to say is, what can we do to help develop this person? What experiences can we create? And if we can't, then a bit like sports teams, they have to let people go sometimes because the team needs something different.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on that topic of, you know, you talk about your daughters having a different expectation or idea of what their careers might look like. I mean, how have you seen those expectations change over the years? I mean, have you, you know, sort of the most important requirements expressed by employees, you know, it might be flexi working, salary, benefits, work-life balance, social impact, that sort of stuff. Have you seen
I mean, there's definitely a shift. I mean, topics that probably, you know, when I started weren't at the top of the agenda. So sort of inclusion, diversity, equity, you know, definitely key. Obviously there's a generation that is going to have to deal with the whole environment and sustainability. So that's really important because, you know, they're going to be left with trying to see what the world looks like. And, you know, kind of the whole piece of it, I call it work-life integration, work-life sort of coming together, then balance, because balance is a personal choice. And I think there is something around, you know, people want different experiences. They just don't want to be kind of tied to a desk for that whole period of time. So definitely different pieces and much more open discussions about they want, you know, certainly want a company to be open about sort of their well-being philosophies. You know, how do you treat people? How do you show flexibility in the work they do? Definitely very much at the forefront than it would have been maybe even 5 or 6 years ago. So different expectations, and
definitely.
often,
I think
sorry.
I was going to say that, like the sort of burnout or, you know, work-life balance thing is a big point, and I think like we say, post-pandemic as well, it seems to become more and more important in terms of, obviously a lot of people struggled in that period of time, and it is a really hot topic. So I think, you know, as employers, it's being very aware of that. I think also we see, particularly with startups, a risk of burnout with employees. They can expect a lot from the owners, directors, you know, can sort of expect a lot from their teams and get a lot out. A lot of people put into it, you know, and put a lot forward, but recognizing that burnout before it happens, because if it becomes too late, then, you know, they drop off a cliff at the other side and you lose someone who's really good for the business. And, you know, understanding or recognizing where those trigger points might be, maybe if they get a promotion or take on extra responsibility, being extra vigilant of those signs of burnout and that sort of stuff. And you can do stuff to support teams in that respect. We've done a lot with wellbeing coaching with some of our clients that where people there's been some which are emergencies where people are suffering from burnout and have almost, you know, ready to go, no, I can't do it anymore, where you can step in and help. But it's better to do it before then. You know, maybe when someone gets promotion or something like that, it's a good time to have some one-to-one coaching sessions sort of about their sort of longer term ambitions and personal drivers, because that can really align well with the business and help them be successful. But so yeah, that's important. Have we got any other questions? Well, something Sammy actually brought up was what influence and impact does the office environment and building itself have on staff retention?
And I think I go back to what I said earlier. I think again, there's an element of personal choice, but I think it doesn't matter the way the environment in the office is. The traditional look and feel doesn't necessarily work. You know, I've heard this conversation when I'm sitting on the tube. You know, they refer to their office as a destination, and I think we also sometimes make the mistake of when people are in that we kind of say, oh, they're working at their desk, and allowing a bit more time for engagement within the physical work environment is important. So as a result of it, having an environment that allows those casual conversations, the brainstorming moments, and showing a difference is quite critical. It's no good now, people want to have certain types of coffee. They want to have an environment where they can, have casual conversations, focused conversations. So I do, without getting the mechanics of what Sammy may be referring to, but it cannot look like the old traditional desks, and you've got to have breakout spaces, and some companies do hoteling type approach much better. It depends on your workforce, and as I said, you need to look at data to say, well, what are the demographics of the organization you have, and if you have 5 generations, you have different needs. So you've got to try and you've just got to try and meet that. And but I do believe we have to be more mindful on the way we use the office, and not just people sitting at their desk. Of course they've got to do that, but making sure when they're in the office we're connecting and we have environment that allows them to do that. And at Essensys we try to do that. We've got little breakout areas. Often when we're all in, there's never enough room, but it is making those sort of small connections and breaking cross-functional silos. That also helps make the office a little bit that everybody can sort of engage. Doesn't matter which function you work for.
It's sort of even more important, that social interaction thing, because that's what's bringing people in. They can do their work almost as effectively, depending on the type of work exactly, but really effectively at home at their own desk. And why should they go in? And the motivation for most people I speak to is to have the social interaction. Obviously you've got to work as well, but it's working closely with someone, sharing ideas, that sort of thing. And you want to be able to, you want an environment that can promote that as best as possible, I suppose. Well, I think we're getting toward the end now, Kally, and I just wanted to maybe give a few top tips for people in terms of what they could do to help retain their best people within their business. And so I will just the top 3 things I think are most important. Probably one of the first things we talked about it's understanding the motivations of the individual. So spend some time, right at the beginning, when in the interview process, when you're onboarding, and continually through their career, understanding what is motivating them personally, and genuinely caring. I think that is something, and I was touching on it earlier, but that's what people need and people want, is to be a company that cares for them, looks after them, and genuinely wants them to reach those personal goals. But recognizing what those are, so you can not tailor their career necessarily, but understand what you can offer them that's going to help them do that. Because what's right for one person in the same job role will be very different to someone else. So when you recognize that, you can be promoting that, and then consistent sort of one-to-ones with them to make sure that's happening. That would probably be my number 1 top tip. 2 others, I suppose, that as I mentioned before, probably common mistakes I see that are easily avoided, is understanding who you need at the very beginning, the type of skill set that's required, and what that's going to look like. So what your job brief is in detail, because I see very commonly that isn't properly worked out, even once the hiring starts. Because then if you don't know what that is, it's very hard to get the marriage right, obviously. I mean, it's really, really obvious, but it's very, very common. And then I would say the other thing is that where I see people leaving, and you mentioned it before, Kally, that first 3-month period of onboarding and setting the right expectations at that stage and being very clear in how you communicate that. Those are, I suppose, my 3 top ones, but I don't know if there's anything you would add to that or anything else.
I think you've captured it, Alec. I think without a piece, motivation is key, and as a leader, you need to understand that, and always consider that we are individuals. Yes, we're a society, but we are individual. You know, you have to think about, you know, most people always want to know what's in it for me. And the day you can't answer that, then you may have to have a different conversation with the individual to say, hey, you know, there may not be as many opportunities. So I think that sort of sits with the motivation. I think in general, as companies, we need to be more transparent in communications, and do much more effective employee listening. So I think if there are changes happening, or there's change happening, where we can be much more honest about, hey, this is the environment, this is where we are, people are more, you know, they're not silly, they're more likely to believe. It helps with high engagement. High engaged companies have highly engaged and motivated employees. So don't be frightened of that. And when we think about doing pulse surveys, don't be frightened. There's a great question, I think it says, my manager has care and concerns for me. Be brave and ask that. Over the years, you know, it wasn't always the first question in a survey, but it is a key question these days that you should continuously measure.
Yeah, the regular engagement surveys, like 6 months is what we do, and we find it incredibly valuable when because you see some commonalities that come up, and we use the Gallup 12 questions, one of which is my line manager cares about me out of 10. You know, that's and it's, you know, they're really good. So if anyone needs to have a look at some good employee engagement questions, the Gallup 12 are great. And ones to use. So but yeah, Kally, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been brilliant to talk to you, and enjoy the rest of your day painting.
Yes, well, thank you, and apologies at the start, but it was a challenge.
No
now I'll get down to some real skilled work, and the only last thing, Alec, and I'm sure Chennai will tell you, I always like to have the last word. We can't always we can't always create environments like this, but I think one of the stories I love is when somebody was going into NASA and there was a janitor cleaning the floor, and somebody said, what do you do? And he said, I put a person on the man on the moon. That's real connection. You know, make sure the people feel value in what they're doing in whatever the job. I think you'll get a sense of loyalty from that.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Kally.
Thank you.
Look forward to speaking soon. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Bye.